But let's try to pick that up with Dinesh D'Souza talking about what is identity socialism. I don't know what it is either. I've never heard this term before in my life. So I'm really excited. I've done a lot of reading when it comes to leftist ideology. I've never heard of the term identity socialism. Very curious where this is going to go from the great Dinesh D'Souza.
There's a new socialism in town.
Yes.
I call it identity socialism.
Oh, he just calls it
the
that.
old socialism, the kind Karl Marx dreamed up, was all about the working class, the sort of blue-collar worker who, ironically, voted for President Trump. But today's socialists couldn't care.
But they didn't. Like, what? Is, like, what's his... How does he decide that, like, blue-collar workers voted for Trump, but not Biden, or not Bernie, or not anyone else? Like, what? Is it college education? Is that what it's based? That's what he's basing it off of? I'm trying to guess what it is. Because Trump didn't win the election, dude. And he didn't get the popular vote either time. So I don't know what you're talking about here. I'm saying, like, the around 80 million plus people that voted either for Clinton or for Joe Biden were purely the ruling class and the bourgeoisie. I mean, I would have to see some evidence to that. But interesting how he kind of correctly says that Karl Marx was about protecting the working class, and then tries to say that Trump was a Marxist on the low. Like, come on, man. Dinesh.
But today's socialists couldn't care less about the guy in the hard hat. He had his chance at revolution and blew it. Today's socialist is all about race, gender, and transgender rights.
What?
Classes.
Guys, I mean, we talk about on this show, I want to say every single episode, about, like, how does the left win? Rebuild the labor movement. That is the number one thing. Rebuild unions. Rebuild the labor movement. Those are the number one issues or solutions to rebuilding the left power in America or any country. Like, what? It's the conflation of liberals and left, isn't it? Like, in Dinesh D'Souza's mind, Joe Biden's a socialist, and, like, Hillary Clinton's a socialist, and Neera Tanden's a socialist. Like, that's what Dinesh D'Souza thinks, right? Because you talk to any socialist, the first thing they talk about is the labor movement and trying to regalvanize that, rebuild it in some fashion. God damn it, Dinesh. God damn it. Dude, we're less than 30 seconds in. I've stopped at least 2 times. So bad.
Is an afterthought. To understand this is to understand the left's takeover of the college campus and all the ills that takeover has spawned, from Me Too to Black Lives Matter to girls competing against biological boys. But
first, I'm not going to step into the last one because it's stupid. But Me Too and Black Lives Matter are liberal movements, like, explicitly so. And like, socialists have not taken over college campuses. Like, the Cornel West is going through his issue with Harvard right now, and you're saying, and Cornel West is not even like a real socialist in a lot of people's minds. Okay. And he's facing issues with his tenure at Harvard. Like, what are we talking about here, man? Like, the left has never been taking over college campuses. It's never happened.
campus culture has now metastasized into the culture of the whole society. As liberal writer Andrew Sullivan has put it, we all live on campus.
Andrew Sullivan, the liberal writer, yes.
Now, identity socialism is first and foremost about division, not just class division, but now race division, gender division, transgender division. Blacks and Latinos are in. Whites are out. Women are in. Men are out. Gays, bisexuals, transsexuals, transgenders are in. Heterosexuals
True.
are out.
This is accurate. Yep.
Illegals are in. Native-born citizens are out.
Absolutely.
One may think this is all part of the
Or instead forcing immigration from the native-born away from America and just letting anyone in. That's what's happening right now. Yes. Yes. What? Like... I always forget this before we watch PragerU videos about how like it's just nonstop bullshit. It's just a nonstop word vomit that means nothing. It's all lies, and you really have to like sit here and say like everything's wrong. Like everything you're saying is wrong not to a degree. I mean, it is. Because intersectionality is kind of what he's talking about, right? The idea that understanding oppression, exploitation, it's not just along class lines, along race lines, gender lines, and stuff like that. That's been overall leftist understanding for quite some time. And there's some debate about that and prioritization of certain issues and antagonisms within society and how you work for liberation. But intersectionality is not about sowing division. It's actually about bringing these different forms of oppression, exploitation into one commonality to fight against. Right? Because when you fight against capitalism, you have to also fight against the patriarchy. You have to also fight against racism, both socially, culturally, and institutionally. To do one without the other would defeat the overall purpose and overall fight to some degree. Because if you defeat capitalism, but patriarchy exists, then the creation of property is not that far. We've seen in history. That's how property became a thing, was through the man having dominion over the household and, in a sense, monogamous marriage. If you don't know about that, I recommend reading Frederick Engels' The Origin of the Family, Private Property and the State. Really fascinating read. But that's not division. So like that's why it's just not true. But yes, we want illegals in and we want the native-borns out.
You may think this is all part of the politics of inclusion, but to think that is to get only half the picture. The point for the left is not merely to include, but also to exclude. So where did this identity socialism come from? Meet Herbert Marcuse. Born in Berlin in 1898, Marcuse fled Germany at the dawn of the Nazi era. After stints at Columbia, Harvard, and Brandeis, Marcuse moved to California, where he joined the University of California at San Diego in 1965. You'd think that living in a paradise like Southern California, with all the comforts and privileges of academic life, might have softened Marcuse's Marx-like hatred of capitalism. But it was not to be. If anything, the more he prospered, the more he wanted to bring the system down.
Did I hear this correctly, that this guy fled Nazi Germany? Hold on. I gotta rewind that. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I gotta make sure I heard that right. Because I don't really know this person. I haven't heard this name before.
Born in Berlin in 1898, Marcuse fled Germany at the dawn of the Nazi era.
Dinesh D'Souza has an issue with a refugee? Shocker. And he hating a refugee from Nazism? Wow, another big shocker there.
Stints at Columbia, Harvard, and Brandeis, Marcuse moved to California, where he joined the University of California at San Diego in 1965. You'd think that living in a paradise like Southern California, with all the comforts and privileges of academic life, might have softened.
Oh, he's a Frankfurt school guy. Oh my God. Of course. It's all about critical race theory and critical theory. Oh my God. So
soften Marcuse's Marx-like hatred of capitalism. But it was not to be. If anything, the more he prospered, the more he wanted to bring the system down. He had a problem, however, a big one. Socialism didn't work in America. Life was too good. The working class in the US didn't aspire to overthrow the existing order. They aspired to own a home. How could you foment revolution without revolutionaries?
Marcuse lived from 1898 to 1979. So he inspired and was a part of and experienced the revolutionary radical era of the 60s, the late 50s, and the early 70s. I mean, he witnessed people like MLK, Malcolm X, and Fred Hampton get assassinated by the U.S. government. He saw things like the Kent State shooting by the state National Guard. So, what are you talking about here, man? Like, he lived and experienced one of the most extreme revolutionary periods of U.S. history. And he came into the U.S. at the heels of another revolutionary period in the Great Depression, when we had two socialist parties, a communist party, the CIO, force FDR into a New Deal economics that he experienced in Germany. So this painting of America is just such a lie. It is.
Classic Marxism had no answer for this.
No,
but
we
almost
do.
100 years after Marx, Marcuse did. The answer was college students. They would be the recruits for what he termed the great refusal, the repudiation and overthrow of free market capitalism. Conditions were perfect. The students of the 60s were already living in what was in effect a socialist commune, a university campus. Rather than
University campuses are not like socialist communes. As someone that has been in a university before, is not like a socialist commune at all.
being grateful to their parents for providing them with this opportunity to learn and study, they were restless and bored. Most importantly, they were looking for meaning, a form of self-fulfillment that went beyond material gratification. Of course, as with all successful social movements, timing was critical. Here, Marcuse was very fortunate. The 60s was the decade of the Vietnam War. Students faced the prospect of being drafted. Thus, they had selfish reasons to oppose the conflict. Marcuse and his acolytes.
Dude, Dinesh, we killed 3 million Vietnamese people. At least. We killed, I think it was like 2 million people in Laos. Like, what are you talking about? It was selfish for people not to want to go bomb poor people across the world to stop communism. Like really? Like what?
Turned this selfishness into righteousness by teaching the students that they weren't draft dodgers, they were noble resistors who were part of a global struggle for social justice. Marcuse portrayed Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Cong as a kind of third world proletariat.
They are
fighting to free themselves from American imperialism.
Yes, they
This
were.
represented a transposition of Marxist categories. The new working class were the Vietnamese freedom fighters. The evil capitalists were American soldiers serving on behalf of the American.
No, that's not how Marxists thought at that era. We fully were aware that the working class were being drafted to go fight the working class in Vietnam for the ruling class fight between these two countries. Or I don't say between these two countries. At the behest of the South Vietnamese ruling class, the U.S. ruling class made their working class go fight their war. That's what happened. the U.S. generals, the U.S. government, obviously the corporations, they are the evil capitalists. The poor man, the poor grunt on the ground that got drafted, no. We were fighting for him not to be drafted. Why? Because he is part of the working class. He shares more in solidarity with those North Vietnamese and Viet Cong than with you, Dinesh D'Souza. But he thinks this war was like a good war, apparently. Like, who the fuck thinks the Vietnam War was like a righteous war anymore?
American government. Marcuse found, in addition to the students, other groups ripe for the taking. The first was the Black Power movement, which was a militant adjunct to the civil rights movement. The beauty of this group, from Marcuse's point of view, was that unlike white students, its members wouldn't have to be instructed in the art of grievance. Blacks had grievances that dated back centuries. Through another Marxist transposition, blacks would become the working class, whites the capitalist class.
Dinesh, what racial group enslaved the other to make them a free labor force for hundreds of years? And then when that group was freed, they were not given any economic restitution, reparations. They were not given anything to support themselves. And in large sections, they were actually forced back into quasi-slavery in the South. What are you talking about? Which group was subject to Jim Crow? Remind me, Dinesh. Which group is often used as a cheaper labor force, as evident by the wage gap?
Based on this analysis, took the place of class. Another emerging source of disgruntlement was the feminists. Marcuse recognized they too could be taught to see themselves as an oppressed class. This, of course, would require a further Marx.
By the way, feminists did not need to be taught in the 1960s that they were an oppressed class. They were fully aware of that. And still are. Especially from a man. They don't need to hear that. They know. And there's a long, long history of feminism that predates Marcuse in the Marxist tradition and the anarchist tradition as well.
Marxist transposition, women would now be viewed as the working class and men the capitalist class. The class category.
What group exploits the other for their labor? Like, what group profits off the other, both historically and contemporary? Like, these are simple questions that anyone should be able to ask when they hear this bullshit. It's like, well, what group has been the exploited group? What group has been forced to be the working class of the capitalists? It's often been women. Look at factories in the turn of the century. Or the Industrial Revolution, even before that. There's women and children.
Would now be shifted to gender. Marcuse recognized that educating and mobilizing all these groups,
and by the way, these aren't being shifted to these things. They're in addition to it. These class antagonisms, as a result of economic inequality and separation, plays into racism, plays into sexism. Okay. And you can actually probably say the reverse with sexism, that the patriarchy existed before capitalism, of course. So which one was the chicken, which one was the egg? You know, it's up to you, I think, to decide to some degree in terms of economic exploitation, because economic exploitation, the commodity production, obviously existed before capitalism as well. But digressing. Let's just get through this.
Bored students, the aggrieved blacks, and the angry feminists would take time. But he wasn't in a hurry. Soon enough, the radical students would be the radical professors, teaching identity socialism to a fresh crop of impressionable recruits. Over time, Marcuse believed the university could produce a new type of culture, and that culture would then spill into the larger society to infect primary education, the news media, and entertainment. Even big business, the hated capitalist class itself, would succumb. He was right.
No.
Identity socialism has
None of
arrived.
this is true.
I'm Dinesh D'Souza for Prager
None of that was
University.
true.
This video was made
Oh my God, that was rough, man. Holy shit.